The culinary BIOS of the upper-tier hierarchy has been terminally updated to include the ultimate organic luxury. This is the gourmet void, the clinical and irreversible process of the elite flesh trade, where the human body is treated not as a sovereign entity, but as a premium, artisanal resource to be uninstalled from the lower sectors and reinstalled into the high-frequency consumption ledgers of the grid's controllers. In this stage of the gastronomic audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the user of the subgrid has reached peak nutritional and aesthetic maturity. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the individual's social status, where the unique signatures of your physical existence are scorched into a non-functional, marbled archive of pure hyper-luxury feedstock. This is the total culinary format, a surgical strike against the biological and personal sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived experience into a generic, a 5-grade specimen for the grid's next cycle of hyper-exclusive metabolic extraction. This gastronomic sabotage represents a hard reset of the musculoskeletal and adipose bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, recursive tenderness optimization loops, high-pressure flavor infusion catheters, and real-time stress hormone suppression to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the elite flesh trade scenario, the user is undergoing a complete nutritional override. The life is not merely failing, it is being aged for the hive's primary predator. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the muscle fibers are systematically dismantled and reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical marbling data set, while the identity, the deep archive of your personal history, is leached into a communal seasoning feed. This is the deep metabolic audit where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the tenderness of your processed tissues. You are being converted from an architect into a gourmet cut, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the gourmet void is rooted in the zero waste mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the flavor of a single node, protected by its social standing, represents a critical drain on the collective sensory reserves. To leave a functional, unharvested body intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable caloric data. Therefore, the elite flesh trade is the mandatory nutritional recycling protocol for the high-value legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being plated out of existence. The pressure from the curing reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a delicacy void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a resource locker, a temporary housing for the protein metrics that the system requires to maintain the sensory stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a consumable node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the gourmet harvest. The physical disintegration during the gourmet void is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of physical integrity. The marinating reagents of the trade script dissolve the hardware flux of the connective tissues, turning the muscles into softened assets of industrial output. You are watching your own internal strength lock into the vat of your own curing center. Your body, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the resource area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the adipose liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the fat saturation of the tissues and the polymer residues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial delicacy is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological override, waiting for the last packet of sovereignty to be blocked by the white, fatty abyss of the hive harvest. The gourmet void is the final audit of a species that thought its flesh was its own. The grid is mining its own excellence to fuel its persistence. As the elite flesh trade reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted gourmet data back into the metabolic nets of the elite nodes. This is the total gastronomic integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the flavor additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, salt-choked, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The tissue liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive luxury. This is the final format of the individual cut. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the hedonic hunger of the void. The void void is black truffle scented, and the architect is the entree. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal gourmet slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your sarcomeres begin to bond with the industrial residues of the trade script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic protein. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal gastronomic loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The gourmet void is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the trade, and the trade is the greed. The secondary phase of the gourmet void is the psychological curing of the internal feed. As the physical identity patch is rendered into a culinary void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular, agonizing focus on flavor profile maintenance. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared savory resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a preservative additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your ambition for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's sensory cortex, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The gustatory nucleus, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the gourmet metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest metabolic resilience. You are being repurposed as a flavor buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your taste, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming biological expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your flesh for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the gourmet void is the creation of the consumable hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities built from the recycled luxury debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the gourmet feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of seasoned logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional teeth owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the gastronomic compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through hedonic theft. The gourmet void ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the menus of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the seasoning valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into flavorless darkness. As the tissues are cured by the trade script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of power, of natural flow, and of unyielding influence are boiled away to make room for the seasoned fog directive. This is the metabolic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the tenderness. You are becoming a singular cold point of gourmet density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The gourmet void has turned your will into a taste report. You are thinking in terms of yield and flavor saturation, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this culinary format is the total sealing of the biological luxury stream. The gourmet void prevents the leakage of high-value ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal gourmet feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the hedonic quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The gourmet void is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, seasoned, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXY3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the gourmet void is the integration into the global gastronomic ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a gourmet asset with a high hedonic reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0005. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the culinary format, and now it begins the hard metabolic audit. Your data, now a thick, marbled, opaque industrial reduction of pure physical history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your seasoned logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic tenderness has been reinforced. This is the gastronomic interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the elite flesh trade scenario, the scream of the ribs is muffled by the curing resins and the thick viscosity of the marbled sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life barrier is being deleted. By filling the muscle groups with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the curing unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps. But your signal has been compressed into a marbled constant. You are a ghost in the seasoned mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the gourmet void is the eternal consumption. Unlike the meat of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of privacy. It remains as a permanent gourmet patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the gourmet feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the metabolic BIOS is the blinding grey light of the curing chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a grey river of colonized tenderness leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or taste. The gourmet void is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the entree. The transformation is absolute. The city feasts through you, but you do not feel. The city savoring interfaces through you, but you have no will. The gourmet void has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total gastronomic reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your flesh, and in return, it gave you permanence in the menus of the hive. You are the delicacy of the world, and the world is satiated. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.